Well, hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for the next session in our Attention Summit. Can social media and retail media be friends? I'm Deborah Aho Williamson. I'm a principal analyst here at Insider Intelligence, and I focus on social media marketing, advertising, and usage. I'm based in Seattle, but today I'm in sunny San Diego, and I am joined by a very special panel. We have Melanie Zimmerman, who is a vice president and head of Macy's Media Network. Hey, Melanie, how are you
Hi,
and where are you coming from?
I'm based in New York.
Awesome. Great to have you with us. Liz, you're executive director, US head of social for VML the agency. Where are you based?
I'm based here in cloudy Chicago.
All right. Well, awesome. It's so great to have both of you today. We have a really awesome conversation about retail media and social media coming up. But before we begin, please let us know where you're tuning in from. You can do that using the chat window on the right. And you can also use that same window to ask us questions, which we will be trying to intersperse throughout our conversation. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And I wanted to set the stage by telling you a bit about why I wanted to do this panel. So I have been covering social media for a long time. Like I mentioned, I have noticed how social media has grown and become one of the most dominant forms of advertising and marketing there is in the digital world. And lately, we've been seeing retail media coming on the scene. My colleague Andrew Lipsman often refers to retail media as the third wave of digital advertising, with search being the first and social being the second. And I sort of selfishly maybe started to think, well, hey, well, how does social media feel about being that middle child between search and this rising force of retail media? So I wanted to explore that, and this is a topic that I don't think has gotten as much attention as it should. So hopefully, we're going to shed some light on what's going on. There's basically going to be, I think, three different buckets of conversation with Liz and Melanie. We'll start off by talking about how retail media might be affecting the way marketers use and view social media. We'll get into how retail and social media might be similar, and we'll also talk about how they're different. And then we'll finally talk a little bit about how retail and media and social media might be able to work together. So with that, I think I'd like to dive in, Liz, and lay a little bit of groundwork. So you work in social media. I'm curious to know, what is the chatter about retail media at your agency and among your clients? I mean, as someone who's been working in the space, how are you thinking about it within your agency relative to the great work that you guys do in social media?
Sure. I would say on a macro level, retail media is definitely growing among our client base. But social media is also still growing. And I think, Debbie, to extend your metaphor about the middle child, as any Jan Brady knows, it's essential to be able to get along with everybody. And to answer the title topic of the panel, I think that social media advertising is friends with everybody. It started as the second screen. And synergies with other media channels have always been a very real part of advertising on social media. So I don't necessarily see the third wave of retail media being a threat so much as an additional layer of context that we can take advantage of.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So I'm curious, Melanie, with working at Macy's, obviously you work on Macy's Retail Media Network. The companies that you want to sell ads to are probably also the same types of companies that would advertise on social platforms. So I'm curious, how do you differentiate yourself from social media, and how do you think about when you're approaching advertisers, the fact that they are also probably social media advertisers, maybe looking to expand or extend into something like a Macy's Media Network?
Yeah, I think the key point I would make is that as a retail media agency, we help clients run media not only on the retailer sites, but also off-site. So for social media specifically, we can help our clients reach specific, highly qualified audiences in social media platforms, whether that's Meta, Pinterest, TikTok. We have a really solid business as it relates to off-site media, not only on-site. And so for me, it's really not either or. It's sitting down with clients to understand their media objectives and then figuring out what's that right media mix. And offsite has been just as successful as onsite. There might just be different media KPIs in the mix.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would be good to kind of go back. I probably should have asked you this as the first question. If you could just talk a
Mhm.
little bit generally about the Macy's Media Network and what it is and the types of advertisers that you reach or you want to reach with that network.
Yeah, I would love to give a quick overview. So we started building out our retail media network 3 years ago. And from the onset, we wanted to serve advertisers both on-site and off-site. So if you look at what we can do today, we serve on-site display, on-site video, sponsored product listings on our site. And I certainly see with endemic brands, meaning the brands that sell their goods at Macy's and Bloomingdale's, a really high interest in reaching that shopper close to the point of conversion, which is also why a lot of advertisers are thinking about retail media typically as the conversion media. That being said, off-site media has been playing a really huge role for us as well. So we are playing not only the role of a publisher, we're also playing the role of an agency. And so clients can work with us to place media buys in social media, and we can serve their ads to those target audiences so that we ultimately have a full funnel media plan in place for those clients.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, and let's move on and talk a little bit about the ways that social media and retail media might be similar. On the face of it, it's interesting. It may not seem like they have all that much in common. Obviously, when you think about social platforms, you think about engaging with your friends or your family, watching videos, commenting, everything that you would expect from a social environment. Whereas retail media is really very, very close to the point of purchase. You're hopefully trying to attract people to buy something in the moment. But the more I started to look into this, the more I've started to realize that there are some things that retail media and social media do have in common, and some of the same benefits. I mean, I'm thinking about things like many of these platforms offer a large and engaged audience. I mean, if you were, for example, to look at Amazon versus Meta, I mean, both of them have very large and engaged audiences of people who are regularly visiting the platforms. They both offer targeted advertising. And there's, of course, e-commerce integrations, obviously more so with a platform like Amazon or with Macy's, but those are just a couple of things that came up for me. So I'm curious, maybe Melanie, I'll start with you. What else do you think that retail media might have in common with social media when it comes to what you offer marketers and advertisers?
I think if you look at the advertising formats, they're becoming quite similar. Last fall, we rolled out on-site video advertising. And so if you look at the video ads running in social media, it's becoming increasingly similar to video ads that we can run on our site. However, we're reaching the consumer at a different point in their consideration and research stage, right? So when you're in social media, you're really open for exploring ideas and discovery. When a shopper goes to a retailer site, they typically have a specific need and they're much more mission driven. Therefore, I do think that social media and retail media have connection points, but ultimately it's reaching that consumer in different stages.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, another thing, and maybe Liz, I'll bring you in on this because I think this is something that would resonate really well with you and the work that you do. Earlier today, Andrew Lipsman, who is one of my colleagues at Insider Intelligence, talked about how retail media is also moving up the brand funnel and be offering more opportunities for brand advertising. Obviously, that's a big focus for social platforms as well. So, Liz, when you think about things that are in common between retail media and social media, what kinds of things do you think of?
Yeah, I would actually consider both of these media channels potentially full funnel. And I think that the core thing that retail media and social media have in common is that they are environments where you can get very clear digital signals from consumers, whether that is about the products that they're shopping for directly or about the content that they're consuming, the questions that they have, the communities that are important to them, which can all be important brand signals for brands to send particular messages to people at particular times. I think another thing that intersects with this kind of merging of the two media channels is the growth in social search, where you see, platforms like Pinterest have been in that space for a long time, but even TikTok is starting to emerge as a key search platform among people. So it's not necessarily as far from the point of purchase as it might be tempting to say if you just look at a 35,000 foot view at these types of media channels.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. And I'm so glad you mentioned social search because it's something that's been on my radar. We saw years ago Facebook trying search, and we see platforms like you mentioned, TikTok and Pinterest getting more involved in it again. So I think we're going to definitely see a lot more in that realm, and I'll be researching that in Q2. Just put in a little plug there for everybody who's listening, who's a client. So Melanie, that's interesting. I mean, when you look at your own network, is search advertising something that you're offering on your network? Let's just pivot and talk about that for a second.
On-site search, very much so. So for on-site search, the advertiser has the opportunity clearly to be top of mind for the consumer actively looking for those goods, and sponsor product listings have been very effective at that. We're less focused on off-site search.
Got it. Okay, cool. I think another thing that is interesting is, obviously targeted advertising is a big part of the proposition of retail media. When I look at your marketing materials, Melanie, I see targeted advertising as one of the big features and functions of your particular network. And even some of the ad formats that we've already talked about on retail media are similar to those on social media. Is that intentional at all? I mean, are you trying to, in some ways, mimic some of the offerings that are on social media, or is it really something different and you're trying to create kind of a different sort of ad format that's going to resonate specifically with your type of clients?
I'd say that for me, it's about helping the advertiser reach their objectives in social media. Specifically, targeted advertising drives value through, for example, significantly higher click-through rates and significantly higher return on advertising spend. We've tested 1P first-party audiences head-to-head with interest-based data segments in social media platforms, and we consistently see significantly higher click-through rate and return on advertising spend. So we can really hone in on the right audiences for the messaging, while the third-party audiences could certainly still broaden the reach. I think that's really where retail media can add value in the context of running social media campaigns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is interesting because, I mean, I think if you were to hear, if someone from a social platform were on here, I think they would probably say a lot of similar things about their own advertising, with the knowledge that some of those signals, or maybe quite a lot of those signals, depending on the type of advertising, have really gone away with the changes that Apple has made to the privacy changes that Apple has made. So, one of the things that I've also been thinking about is, as advertisers are starting to contemplate, the advertisers are probably in a tough spot right now. I mean, there's economic concerns, there's all sorts of pressures on advertisers today to really, maximize their marketing investments. And for better or for worse, we have, and we've been tracking this on the research that we've done, we have definitely seen declines in ad spending on some of the social platforms, some of them having to do with the lack of tracking and targeting capabilities, others of them just having to do with budget cutbacks. Liz, I mean, I think it would be great to hear from you, from your perspective. I mean, again, this is a year when we're seeing a lot of marketers reevaluating their investments in social media, both from the standpoint of just where do I have a social presence and how much do I invest in that, to where they spend their ad dollars. So I'd like to kind of dig in a little bit more and maybe get into a little bit meatier part of the conversation, which is how are clients thinking about the value of retail media investments? And are you seeing any sort of move among your clients away from focusing on social media and towards retail media? Does that come up with you when you're talking with your clients?
It's interesting. I think, by nature, as there's a bit of survivorship bias here, because I am more likely to be working with clients who are maintaining or increasing their spending in social. Although I think the trend that you mentioned about the specific distribution of that budget between platforms is very real. Clients are using more sophisticated ways of plotting out their objectives from channel to channel, and driving the needle forward. What I have observed about retail media is that it seems like budgets are being diverted not directly from social to retail, but from everywhere to retail. So it's not necessarily as linear as watching investments go from one place to another. I think that for a lot of clients, especially those who have been slower to embrace newer media channels, the bigger trend that we're seeing is dollars from traditional mass media and broadcast still being diverted into both social and retail media.
I agree
Interesting.
with that. Mhm.
Okay, yeah. So maybe one of you could address this great question that just came in live from the audience. I'm going to put my glasses on so I could read it because it's in a chat font that's a little bit smaller. So it says, should a client invest the same in social media and retail media? And why or when should they spend more in one? Liz, do you have a viewpoint on that?
It depends on what you're trying to do. I think a lot of these answers are going to be. I think if a brand can get very specific about the objective that they have, which is sometimes, in some categories and for some products, that is going to be a very straightforward shopper objective that is about conversion or, purchase frequency or things that are lower down the funnel. But there's a very wide world of brands out there, and oftentimes, one of the marketing objectives will be less close to the point of purchase. It'll be about perception change. It'll be about becoming preferred or relevant to a new audience, which is obviously a place where social platforms and social advertising can play a much bigger role.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I do see, like, with so many different objectives that advertisers have. I mean, retail media definitely can play strongly in some of those areas, but I think there's still so many benefits that you can think about with social media that aren't necessarily replicated in the retail media environment. So, Melanie, do you have anything?
I would add that it's a very engaged audience in social media. So if you look at Meta as a platform, the click-through rate that you're going to get with content on social media is significantly higher than the click-through rate you're going to get with display media on a retailer side. So even though you're closer at the point of conversion, the customers you're capturing in social media are really standing out in terms of their level of engagement and openness to content.
Yeah. So it's interesting too, when you look at the types of advertisers that are using retail media. I was looking at a recent Forbes article that included some data from a survey by a company called Wakefield Research. And it found that 64% of CPG brands with advertising budgets of 100 million or more thought that they would be increasing their spend on retail media networks this year. Obviously, if you in the audience heard Andrew's presentation earlier, grocery is a big place where retail media is playing. Obviously, Melanie, you're tapping other ad categories. I'm wondering if you can just talk to us a little bit about the types of verticals that you're targeting and that are probably most likely to use Macy's media network.
Yeah. As a department store serving so many generations of consumers, we have the opportunity to work with lifestyle brands across categories. However, I will say that from day one, we've seen the biggest appetite for this in the beauty category, both year 1, year 2, and year 3. The majority of the advertising is come from that category. In apparel, in other categories, we're also seeing a really significant growth rate and interest and participation. So I think it's all of them. However, the beauty category was the one first to embrace it. And perhaps it's because some of those brands also have footprints in CPG. We're with us more like tapping into that higher end luxury space.
Yeah. And Liz, do you have any clients in the beauty or apparel area that are thinking about the social and retail media?
I would say that they all are. I can't think of a client that we have that isn't thinking about this. Even in categories like tech and automotive, where you would traditionally think of this as a purchase cycle that eventually goes offline. They are all trying to tie it together from a retail perspective digitally.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I'd like to also talk a little bit about the types of budgets that are funding retail media advertising. And based on the research that I did, it looks like in many cases it's trade dollars, trade marketing dollars, especially when you're thinking about grocery. Do you have a sense, Melanie, of where the budgets are coming from when you are selling retail media advertising? And do you ever get the sense, getting back to the conversation about social, do you ever get the sense that advertisers are thinking about dollars allocated to social moving to retail media?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I see that very clearly. Even with individual clients, you can see that different stakeholders, for example, there's one client that works with us on the shopper marketing side on social media campaigns, and then is running on-site display campaigns through their agency tapping into their headquarter fund. So it is very clear that we are even signing contracts with different constituencies at these clients. Stepping back, though, I do think that the shopper marketing dollars were the first to really embrace retail media, not surprisingly so. When competing for those upper funnel media budgets, retail media networks need to provide many self-service solutions to agencies. And I think that's one of the key areas that we're increasingly focused on as well.
Interesting. Okay. So I think I'd like to move on and talk a little bit about the fact that in some cases, retail media and social media are partnering together, and there are examples that I've seen out in the industry where, for example, Microsoft has partnered with Meta. Pinterest has an agreement with LiveRamp and Albertsons. So it's not, I mean, we spent a lot of time in the past few minutes talking about, maybe ways that there might be competition, or ways there may be, if not, budgets are shifting. And it sounds like in this case, not necessarily one-to-one, but certainly ways that retail media can tap those budgets with certain types of ad formats. But when it comes to doing a partnership, I'm curious, Melanie, I mean, what might a partnership with a social platform offer a retail media network like Macy's? And I don't know if you have anything going on that you want to disclose, but maybe talk about it theoretically, if so.
Yeah, no, it's not theory. I mean, I've partnered with social media platforms for the last 3 years. I am not just transacting in those platforms. I have strategic conversations with those social media platforms about what we can accomplish together. And in some ways, we're innovating also together, particularly as it comes to measurement, because we can help those social media platforms understand what clients are looking for in terms of measurement and innovate together. We may not be as vocal externally about these partnerships, but we are absolutely deeply entrenched in those social media platforms, not just as customers, but also as strategic partners.
Yeah. Well, measurement's such an interesting area, right? I mean, what I'd love to kind of dig in and talk a little bit more about how retail media can help social media when it comes to measurement. What kinds of things are you thinking about there?
Well, our clients are really looking, not surprisingly, for closed loop measurement. So they want to understand if those ads not only drove great engagement and traffic, but also ultimately conversion, and not at the total retailer level, but at the brand category level. And so I think that's where we've spent a lot of time with the social media platforms, and are actually continuing to spend a lot of time with them to innovate. They're not always making it easy for us. We would love to, for example, also look at new customer acquisition rates with the social media platforms, and not all of the social media platforms are sharing those customer identifiers with us for us to do that work. But as it relates to brand level conversions, we've come a long way very far over the last 3 years to help the advertisers understand that.
Interesting. So Liz, just turning to you, I mean, thinking about your clients and some of the challenges that they might have had with social media and measuring the return on their investments there. I mean, does this kind of partnership and data sound appealing? Is that helpful to you when you, and then also on the media side of your client's business? Would that make sense for you?
I think there's always an appeal in getting more data on the back end of a campaign, as well as being able
to always about data.
more data in designing and serving a campaign. One of the things that continues to be a hurdle across the landscape, or probably across both landscapes, is just the lack of standardization from one platform to another. Because often, people who are planning and buying media are hoping to directly compare one channel to another. But when every ecosystem measures, a video view at a different number of seconds, or like what constitutes a unique user, it makes it very difficult to compare things directly and make smart decisions. Usually the way that we tackle that is to try to design some tests and A/Bs and comparisons at the front side of a campaign, rather than collect a whole bunch of non-standardized data at the back end and try to compare it and see if a story emerges.
Yeah, that is interesting. Well, another thing that I've been thinking about here, and this really kind of ties in, I think, to both the things that you both were saying about measurement and working together. One of the big challenges that's come up in some research that we've done on what brands and what marketers are looking for when it comes to retail media is the fact that there is pretty much right now across retail media networks a lack of standardization. Like every network is different. It's got different ways of measuring, different ways of buying advertising. There isn't a lot of kind of back end simplicity to buying on retail media. And at the same time, each network also seems like a walled garden. And Liz, you'll remember this from the days of social media, from when we would chat years ago about the walled gardens of social media. That issue came up a lot. And, eventually platforms came about to standardize the purchasing of advertising and to make it easier to on the brand side and the owned presence side to create content that can be replicated across platforms. So I'm curious to know, Liz, maybe we'll start with you, if there's any learnings you think that this sort of nascent industry of retail media can get from what's been happening over the years with social media.
I'm curious to see if the learnings are used, because I think, standardization is a big unlock, as we've seen across social media, but it also comes with a downside that, for the platforms and for the networks, there is a competitive advantage, especially in the growth phase, of having more data than anyone else, of having proprietary ways that they can target people and serve ads. So you certainly have to give up a little bit of that differentiation in order to unlock the standardization.
Yeah. How about you, Melanie? From where you sit, are you taking any learnings from what social media has gone through with trying to establish easier ways to buy and easier ways to build and maintain an ongoing media investment in social media? I'm sure in retail media there's a lot of experimentation.
I agree with all the points made, and particularly that measurement is typically the area where clients are looking for most standardization. As a retail media network executive, I'm very open to that standardization. I think there is great dialogue happening in the industry to land on those standards, and we will absolutely participate in that. Of course, as a retail media network, executives also want to differentiate and go above and beyond in serving our clients. So you'll always see me heavily lean into measurement and go as deep as I can. So I think that at a high level, we may agree on certain standards in terms of attributions, etc. But then I will always strive to go as deep as possible, because we just have so much data, and I hope that with some of the custom reporting I'm going to build, I'll help my clients to a greater extent than some of the competitors in my space.
All right. Well, we are getting to the close of our session here. I think I might see a question coming in. Let's see. Well, yep, I think we are just about at the end of our session. So thank you so much. I think just to wrap up, we've seen a lot of great commentary about whether the social platforms and retail media can work together. And I think in a lot of cases, the answer is yes. I do think there are places where they're going to compete. We'll definitely be paying attention to that and seeing where the ad dollars are going. But this has been a really awesome conversation. And I encourage you to continue to think about this. Melanie, Liz, you guys have been wonderful. Thank you again for the great content and for answering all of my questions, including the audience question. I want to just say to everybody who's listening in, we have 2 more great sessions coming up after this. One of those is with Max Willens. He's going to be doing a session on navigating the complexity of retail media networks, which I think is a perfect tie-in to what we were just now talking about. And the other one is with Evelyn Mitchell on activating first-party data. Again, great segue from some of the conversations that we've been having. So again, thank you, Melanie and Liz, for joining. Thank you to the audience. And if you're interested in joining and want to hop over to the next session, you can join either Max or Evelyn next by clicking on the tab below the video. It says Next Session. Thank you so much for joining us.